Assalamu alaikum. This is Moel. So in this video, I would like to discuss the Moel consciousness and rational faculties argument 1.0. And the reason it's 1.0 because in this one, it's supposed to be my introduction to my arguments. So in order for me to basically build a foundation, I have to go to the academics. So if you watch the 3.0, I still haven't dug up 2.0, but if you watch a 3.0, you will notice that in 3.0, it's my own philosophy. I'm basically contemplating and postulating and basically theorizing based on coherence and an axiom, an epistemic foundation to justify my negation towards physicalism, naturalism, reductive materialism as a presupposition, okay, a metaphysical presupposition. So this is why in this video it's 1.0, because I'll be quoting what the academics say, okay. So we'll start off by Thomas Nagel, who's an atheist philosopher. In his book Man and Cosmos, Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian conception of nature is almost certainly false. Okay, so in his book, he explains why consciousness poses such an intractable problem for naturalism. Okay. Consciousness is the most conspicuous obstacle to a comprehensive naturalism that relies only on the resources of physical science. The existence of consciousness seems to imply that physical description of the universe, in spite of its richness and explanatory power, is only part of the truth, and that the natural order is far less austere than it would be if physics and chemistry accounted for everything. If we take this problem seriously and follow out its implications, it threatens to unravel the entire naturalistic world picture. Yet it is very difficult to imagine a viable alternative. This is page 35 of his book, and I got this from an article, by the way. You can look it up. Essentially, behaviorists reduce material attributes to some observable behavior. Nagel offers a cogent response. It is certainly true that mental phenomena have behavioral manifestations which supply our main evidence for them in other creatures. Yet, all these theories seem insufficient as analyses of the mental because they leave out something essential that lies beyond the external observable grounds for attributing mental states to others, namely the aspect of mental phenomena that is evidence from first person inner point of view of conscious subject. For example, the way sugar tastes to you, or a way red looks or anger feels, each of which seems to be something more than the behavioral responses and discriminatory capacities that these experiences explain. Behaviorism leaves out the inner mental state itself. So basically what he's trying to say in a nutshell, I'm just going to explain it quickly, that we cannot basically explain subjectivity, the inner subjective state of the individual, how it feels like for me to eat or taste a banana, for example, or strawberry, than it is for someone else. So that inner subjective state is something personal, okay, that science has no foot in the door to explain, or materialism, physicalism, reductive materialism, basically. So this is Thomas Nagel in his book Man and Cosmos. He's an atheist. He's basically saying that a purely naturalistic account for human cognition and consciousness is not good enough. Academic atheists and scientists will have to come up with a better explanation, and that's why some academics assume panpsychism, but it's still not a just philosophical justification. You know what I'm saying? And if you watch my video 3.0, you will realize that even under physicalism, there is no philosophical justification. Nonetheless, let's go to John Gray, okay? He's an atheist philosopher as well, if I'm not mistaken, or agnostic, it doesn't really matter. His name is, in his book, Gray's Anatomy, Selected Writings. If the human mind has evolved in obedience to the imperative of survival, what reason is there for thinking that it can acquire knowledge of reality, when all that is required in order to reproduce the species is that its errors and illusions are not fatal? A purely naturalistic philosophy cannot account for the knowledge that we believe we possess. This is what he says in his book, Gray's Anatomy, Selected Writing. So obviously, if you're going to presuppose or assume natural selection, Darwinism, all these things are science. So science has no foot on the door, basically. You know, and if science is based on survival value, not truth value, then if we evolved under these conditions, what makes us assume that the science that we have is true? You know what I'm saying? So now let's go to Francis Crick as well, who's I believe he's an agnostic. In his book, The Astonishing Hypothesis. Our highly developed brains, after all, were not evolved under the pressure of discovering scientific truths, but only to enable us to be clever enough to survive and leave descendants. So that's the same thing. This is in line with Gray's thinking as well, because these people are philosophers at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken. Francis Crick is also a scientist, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, the last man that I want to quote, and he's a man who's been misrepresenting academia on a social scale, and a lot of neo-atheists have been regurgitating his nonsense and looking up to him, and he's intellectually dishonest, to be frank. But nonetheless, in his book, The Moral Landscape, Sam Harris, he's at least honest. In The Moral Landscape, I think maybe it was in his footnotes, I don't know, but I got the quote anyway. It says, our logical, mathematical, and physical intuitions have not been designed by natural selection to track truth. If they're not designed by natural selection, which is a fundamental assumption in Darwinian evolution, then please explain to us how we came to be, or how did consciousness and cognition and math and all these axioms that we have, such as reason, rationality, you know, all these things, how did they arose? How did they basically emerge? How did they emerge under natural selection? Obviously, they do not have an answer, the academics, and this is why now I quote the last man who wants to impose and presuppose physicalism by any means necessary. He's a naturalist. You know, he doesn't want to believe in anything mystical and spooky. And he actually says that in his podcast, and I'll quote him. His name is Malcolm McIver. He's a neurobiologist, physicalist. Okay, he's a physicalist. And he's an atheist academic nonetheless. And he'll say this in his, he said this in his podcast. Consciousness doesn't need any mystical, spooky stuff to go ahead and eventually explain it. We don't understand the explanation yet, but we have every reason to think that we'll get there in perfectly physical, natural terms. So one thing you can establish, if that's an argument you're going to make, even though we don't yet have an explanation, is that it's possible to imagine a purely naturalistic explanation. This is Malcolm McIver, okay? And so basically, other academics are saying, this is what the academics are saying, okay? Let me just summarize now. Some academics are saying that a purely naturalistic account cannot justify or explain human cognition and consciousness, and we have to come up with something better. This is the ilk of Thomas Nagel, John Gray, even Francis Crick. You know what I'm saying? Is beyond evolution. Anthony O'Hare, Alvin Plantinga, C.S. Lewis, even John Shirley. John Shirley, I made a video, you can check it out. Can AI possess consciousness? He's the main man to go to, a philosopher of mind, and he says AI cannot possess consciousness. And he says we live it back in the days we used to believe in the age of reason, the age of faith, the age of enlightenment. Today is the age of bullshit. And you got this guy Malcolm McGyver who wants to actually impose it. He wants to say no, we can imagine that we can basically find an explanation under a purely naturalistic account. He's basically trying to negate John Gray. But we still don't have an answer. So it's all about presuppositions now. Which axioms makes the most sense philosophically? Physicalism or God, which is monotheism. Okay? Mystical, spooky stuff, as he calls them. Okay? So it's mystical at the end of the day. That's what I've been saying. So I'll leave you at that. Contemplate and reflect and ponder. Okay? Peace out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.